He was still dry. That's the detail people forget when they replay this later. The kid hadn't broken a sweat yet, hadn't taken a single live-action shot that counted for anything, and he was already deciding how the story of tonight would end. Warm-ups were still going. Balls were still bouncing off rims in that loose, meaningless rhythm of pre-game shooting, sneakers squeaking without urgency, music thumping low under the arena lights while ushers finished setting up the baseline seats. And in the middle of all that nothing, the rookie turned toward the other basket, found the eyes of the one veteran everyone in the building actually came to watch, and said the sentence that would define his night before his night had even started. He said he was already finished with him, not going to be, already was, as if the game itself was a formality, a box to check on the way to a conclusion he'd already written in his head. The problem is he forgot to tell the clock. Because 90 seconds after the opening tip, he wasn't saying anything at all. That's the shape of tonight's story, and it's worth sitting in that discomfort for a second before we go further, because the ending is not the interesting part. The interesting part is how a person gets to a place where he feels entitled to declare victory before the contest begins. That confidence has to come from somewhere. Nobody wakes up and invents arrogance out of thin air. It gets built piece by piece, usually by people who should know better, and by moments that reward the wrong lesson. So before we get to the 90 seconds that ended his sentence, we have to understand the years that built it. He arrived in the league the way certain rookies do, wrapped in noise before he'd played a single real minute. Highlight reels from college had circulated for 2 years before draft night, cut and reviewed by strangers who found something electric in the way he moved. A first step that looked illegal in slow motion, a handle that made grown defenders look like they were standing on ice. Scouts used words like generational in whispered tones during private workouts, the kind of word that follows a young athlete around like a shadow, growing longer the more it gets repeated. By the time he was drafted, he wasn't just a prospect, he was a promise. And promises, unlike performances, don't require proof. They only require belief, and belief is the easiest thing in the world to manufacture around a young man with a fast first step and a faster mouth. The people around him fed it. That's the part nobody likes to admit out loud, but it's true in almost every version of this story, across every sport, in every era. An agent who needed a marketable personality, a shoe deal that wanted a face, not a footnote. Teammates who laughed a little too hard at jokes that weren't that funny, because laughing along was easier than being the one who didn't. A hometown that had waited a long time for someone like him and was desperate to believe the wait was over. Every one of those voices in its own way told him the same thing. You are different, you are ahead of schedule, you don't have to earn what's already yours. And when enough people tell a 20-year-old that story, eventually he stops hearing it as flattery. He starts hearing it as fact. So when the schedule put him across the floor from Bird, a name that meant something in every gym in the country, a player who had spent over a decade turning quiet preparation into loud results, the rookie didn't see a challenge. He saw an opportunity, not an opportunity to prove himself against a legend, which is how most young players would have framed it, but an opportunity to announce himself by subtraction. If he could publicly, visibly, unmistakably dismiss the very idea of Bird as competition, then by implication he would be elevating himself into that same rarefied air, without doing a single thing to actually earn the elevation. It's a shortcut. It's always a shortcut. And shortcuts in this sport have a way of collecting their toll with interest. The gym before tip-off has its own atmosphere, one that never quite makes it through the television broadcast. It's looser than people imagine. Players from both teams sometimes share the same end of the court during early warm-ups, nodding at each other, exchanging small talk that has nothing to do with the hostility that's supposed to exist between opposing jerseys. It's one of the strange intimacies of professional sports. Men who are about to compete with real force against each other, sometimes for their careers, standing 8 feet apart doing layup lines like old friends at a rec league. That environment is exactly why what happened next landed the way it did, because the rookie didn't wait for some private moment some locker room aside meant only for teammates. He said it in the open, mid-stretch, loud enough that 3 or 4 people near both benches turned their heads. I'm finished with this guy, he said, chin tilted toward Bird's end of the floor, before it even starts. There are 2 versions of what happens after a sentence like that gets said, and only one of them is interesting. In the boring version, the veteran laughs it off, maybe fires back something sharp, and the exchange becomes just another piece of pregame theater that gets forgotten by the second quarter. In the version that actually happened, Bird didn't say anything at all. He didn't turn his head sharply, didn't square up, didn't give the rookie the reaction his ego was fishing for. He just kept shooting his warm-up jumper, one smooth, unhurried release after another, the ball finding net with a rhythm that felt almost indifferent to the noise that had just been thrown at him. That non-reaction is its own kind of information, if you know how to read it. Young players mistake silence for weakness. Veterans use silence as a weapon because silence gives away nothing, costs nothing, and lets the other man's words hang in the air a little longer than he wanted them to. A few of the rookie's teammates laughed, one clapped. It's easy to see why, in the moment, a line like that feels like confidence, feels like exactly the kind of swagger a franchise wants from its new face. But watch the tape closely. Watch the small things, and you'll notice something else in that same clip. At least two of his own teammates exchanged a glance. Not a laugh, a glance. The kind of look that says, without a single word, he shouldn't have said that out loud. Because there's an unwritten rule in locker rooms at every level of this sport, one that gets passed down quietly from veteran to rookie and rarely gets broken twice by the same player. You can think whatever you want about the man across from you, but you do not hand him a reason to make an example out of you. The rookie hadn't just disrespected an opponent. He had, without realizing it, issued a challenge to a man who had built an entire career out of answering challenges in the most efficient, least merciful way possible. The arena filled in the way it always does before a marquee matchup, first in trickles, then in waves. Till the lower bowl was awash of team colors and phone flashes, and the broadcast crew was running through pregame packages that, coincidentally or not, kept cutting back to a graphic comparing the two players' season numbers. Commentators, unaware of what had just happened at midcourt 20 minutes earlier, spent the pregame show building the rookie up in exactly the language that had built him up his entire career. Generational, fearless, a changing of the guard. One analyst, almost prophetically, said the words that would look very different in hindsight. Tonight's the night we find out if the hype is real. Nobody in that broadcast booth knew how literally that sentence was about to be tested or how quickly. The horn sounded. Starters were introduced. The rookie ran out through a tunnel of noise built specifically for him, arms raised, soaking in an ovation that had been manufactured months before he'd proven anything worth cheering for. Bird's introduction, by contrast, drew a different kind of reaction. Not louder, but heavier, the kind of respect that doesn't need pyrotechnics to register. Two different energies stepped onto that floor. One was borrowed, one was earned. And in professional sports, that distinction always eventually announces itself, whether anyone's paying attention or not. The opening tip went to the rookie's team. And this is where the 90 seconds begin, the 90 seconds that will be replayed, dissected, and turned into a permanent piece of this rookie's public record long after his own statistics from that game are forgotten. It's worth walking through it almost frame by frame, because the pace at which it unfolds is the entire point. This isn't a slow humbling that builds over a quarter. It's a demolition that fits inside a single commercial break. At the 6-second mark, the ball is in the rookie's hands at the top of the arc, exactly where he wants it, exactly where his highlight reels always started. He takes one hard dribble left, the same first step that terrified college defenders for 2 years, the move that made scouts reach for words like generational. For a half second, looks like it's going to work exactly the way it always has. And then, at the 11-second mark, Bird is simply there. Not lunging, not gambling, not making a wild, desperate swipe, just there, feet set, body positioned a full step ahead of where the rookie's move was supposedly going to end up, as if he'd read the whole sequence before it started. The strip is clean, the ball is gone. And for the first time all night, the rookie's face shows something other than certainty. At the 18-second mark, Bird is already at the other end, in transition. The stolen ball converted into an easy finish that draws the first real roar of the night. Not for a highlight dunk, nothing flashy, just a simple businesslike bucket that says without a single word, "I heard what you said." That's 4 points already unofficially attached to one sentence spoken 20 minutes earlier in an empty gym. At the 34-second mark, the rookie tries to answer, tries to reclaim the moment the only way he knows how, with force, with aggression, attacking downhill like he's trying to erase the last possession through sheer will. He gets to the rim. It looks, for just an instant, like it might work. And then, at the 41-second mark, Bird meets him in the air, not a foul, not a reach. A clean, vertical contest that sends the shot into the third row, an emphatic, unmistakable statement that requires no post-game interview to translate. The bench goes up. The crowd, even the half of it that came specifically to cheer for the rookie, can't help the sound that comes out of them, because some moments transcend loyalty. They just demand a reaction. At the 59-second mark, the broadcast cuts to a courtside camera and catches something the commentators, still unaware of the pregame comment, can't quite explain in real time. The rookie standing near half court, hands on his hips, not talking, not to teammates, not to the referee, not to anyone. The mouth that had so much to say 20 minutes ago has, in under a minute of real basketball, gone completely quiet. At the 73-second mark, Bird gets the ball again, and this time there's no urgency in how he takes it. That's the detail that makes it worse for the rookie, not better. He's not rushing to make a point. He's just playing the way he's always played, unbothered, precise, almost bored by the theater the rookie tried to create. Races from mid-range off one dribble over a late, off-balance contest, and the shot drops with the same clean, practiced arc it's had for over a decade. And then, at the 88-second mark, right at the edge of that 90-second window the whole story hinges on, the ball finds its way back into the rookie's hands one more time, and every camera in the building seems to understand, almost instinctively, that this is the possession people are going to talk about. He drives. Bird is there again. And this time the result isn't a strip or a block, it's a full, complete stop, the rookie's momentum absorbed and neutralized so thoroughly that he loses his footing trying to create separation that isn't there. He goes down. Not a hard fall, not a dramatic one, just an ordinary, undignified loss of balance in front of a sold-out crowd and the national broadcast. The exact kind of moment that never happens to the guy who talked the way he talked 20 minutes earlier. Except tonight, it did. 90 seconds. 2 steals converted into buckets, a rejected layup, a mid-range answer, and a possession that ended with him on the floor. 90 seconds, and the sentence he'd spoken so casually in warm-ups had been rewritten, point by point, into something closer to a confession. The broadcast, still catching up to what the players in that gym already understood 20 minutes earlier, finally aired the warm-up clip during the next timeout, laying his own words over the replay of exactly what had just happened to him. The reaction in the arena shifted the moment people made the connection. Laughter first, then something closer to disbelief, then that specific communal hush that happens when everyone in a building realizes they just watched a man's own words get used against him in real time. The rest of the game happened technically. There were more possessions, more minutes, a final score that will show up in a box score somewhere. But none of it mattered the way those 90 seconds mattered, because the story of the night had already been written before the first quarter ended. The rookie finished the game, but he didn't finish what he said he'd already finished. He spent the remaining 3 quarters doing something he hadn't planned for at all, playing quiet, focused, unremarkable basketball, the kind that draws no attention, the kind you play when you're simply trying to survive the rest of a night that got away from you in under 2 minutes. In the locker room afterward, reporters asked him about the pregame comment, holding up phones already playing the clip that had by then been clipped, captioned, and shared thousands of times. He didn't repeat the line, he didn't defend it. He gave the kind of flat, careful answer that young athletes learn to give only after they've been taught the hard way that words spoken with too much confidence have a way of outliving the moment that produced them. Bird, for his part, didn't need to say much either. Asked about it directly, he offered one sentence, delivered without heat, without triumph, almost gently, the kind of sentence that becomes more devastating the calmer it's said. I let the 90 seconds answer that. That's really the whole lesson if you're looking for one, and it's worth sitting with instead of rushing past. This sport, more than almost any other, has a built-in mechanism for correcting the gap between how a person talks and what a person can actually do. And that mechanism doesn't run on patience. It runs on opportunity, and opportunity in a game like this can arrive in seconds, not seasons. Confidence is not the same thing as competence, and the distance between them is exactly where moments like this one live. The rookie wasn't destroyed because he lacked talent. Nobody gets to that stage without real ability. He was undone because he mistook belief for proof, because he let other people's noise convince him that declaring something true was the same as making it true. And the sport, patient in its own brutal way, simply waited for him to say the wrong thing out loud. Then let 90 seconds do what months of hype had never actually tested. What makes this story linger isn't the humiliation itself. Humiliation is common, forgettable, a footnote in most careers. What makes it linger is the shape of it, the perfect, almost theatrical symmetry between the size of the claim and the speed of its correction. A quieter version of this story happens in gyms and arenas every single week, in every sport, at every level, whenever someone confuses the microphone in front of them for the scoreboard behind them. Most of those moments never get filmed. This one did, and that's exactly why it troubles. Because it captures, in less than 2 minutes of real time, a truth that usually takes people years to learn the hard way. The game doesn't care what you said you already did. It only cares what you can do when the clock actually starts. If this is the kind of story you come back for, the big mouth, the bigger answer, the 90 seconds that rewrite a whole night, there's another one waiting, and it might be even harder to watch than this one.